A living room in Ohio. Two parents who once marched for peace. Kids growing up in a very different America. And one son who didn't just rebel.
Dad, recent studies show you can predict success by the way a person dresses.
Alex, you're a young man. You shouldn't be worried about success.
He flipped the entire generation on its head. Family Ties wasn't loud. It wasn't edgy. It didn't try to shock. But it captured something quietly explosive, a culture shift happening right inside the family home. Tonight, we revisit the sitcom that defined the ADS and separate fact from Fable. If Family Ties was part of your evenings, or if Alex P. Keaton secretly shaped your personality, hit subscribe. Because this story isn't just about a sitcom. It's about how America changed, one family at a time. When Family Ties premiered in 1982, it had a very clear focus. Stephen and Elise Keaton, two former hippies, socially progressive, raising kids in Reagan-era America. The show was meant to explore generational conflict, changing values, parents watching their ideals challenged. People thought Alex Keaton was always meant to be the star, but the fact was he was supposed to be supporting comic relief. Michael J. Fox was the youngest main cast member. Charming, quick, and sharp, but nobody predicted what would happen next. Alex P. Keaton didn't just stand out, he detonated. A teenage conservative, obsessed with capitalism, revered Ronald Reagan, wore suits to high school. At a time when TV teens were rebels, Alex was the establishment, and audiences couldn't look away. A fact was that viewers hated Alex's politics, but they loved his confidence. Michael J. Fox played Alex with intelligence and humor, never cruel, never smug. The joke wasn't that Alex was wrong. The joke was that he was so sure he was right. By season 2, ratings made it clear this wasn't Stephen and Eliza's show anymore. It was Alex's. Michael J. Fox didn't just become a star. He became the star. Producers rewrote episodes to center around Alex. Storylines bent around him. The camera followed his energy. Rumor had it that other cast members resented the shift, but the fact was they embraced it, because Fox elevated every scene. What's less known? Michael J. Fox was doing something unheard of at the time. He was filming Family Ties by day and Back to the Future by night. 4 hours of sleep, constant travel, relentless pressure, and yet he never phoned it in. That work ethic became legend. While Alex became the headline, the soul of Family Ties never changed. Stephen and Elise Keaton remained its emotional anchor. Meredith Baxter and Michael Gross played them with warmth, patience, and realism rarely seen in sitcom parents. They weren't perfect. They weren't clueless. They listened. A fable was that Stephen and Elise were softened to contrast Alex, but the fact is, they were written as principled, not weak. Their love wasn't loud, it was steady, and that mattered. Family Ties didn't rely on chaos, it relied on conversation. Arguments happened around the dinner table. Lessons unfolded naturally. No one won every episode. That's why it felt real. The show trusted its audience and its characters to think, and in the middle of it all, Alex Keaton kept reminding America that the future didn't look like the past. For a show remembered as light and comforting, Family Ties was surprisingly brave. While many sitcoms avoided heavy themes, this one leaned into them, carefully, respectfully, and without losing its heart. Episodes tackled loss, addiction, identity, disappointment, the fear of becoming someone you don't recognize. But the show never shouted its messages, it whispered them. Family Ties avoided very special episodes. It redefined them by grounding serious moments in character, not spectacle. The humor didn't disappear. It simply stepped aside when it needed to. There is one episode fans still talk about in hushed tones. Alex, usually unstoppable, confident, and bulletproof, loses someone he loves. And suddenly, the jokes stop working. Michael J. Fox delivers a performance so raw, so restrained, that it changed how sitcom acting was viewed. No punchlines, no clever speeches, just grief. People thought the scene was improvised, but the fact was Fox rehearsed it relentlessly and still broke down during filming. It was a turning point. From that moment on, Alex wasn't just the funny, conservative kid, he was human, and audiences felt it. Here's a subtle but important truth. Alex P. Keaton was never written to be right. He was written to be certain. That certainty was the joke and the danger. Over time, the writers intentionally let Alex face consequences. Relationships failed. His worldview was challenged. Success didn't always bring happiness. Stephen and Elise weren't there to defeat him. They were there to balance him. That tension is why the show still feels relevant. Mallory Keaton is often remembered as the ditzy one. Fashion obsessed, boy crazy, dismissed, but that memory is incomplete. Justine Bateman played Mallory with surprising nuance, revealing insecurity beneath confidence, kindness beneath vanity. Some thought Mallory was there for pure comic relief, but the writers intentionally gave her emotional intelligence as the series progressed. Mallory wasn't unintelligent, she was underestimated, and for many viewers, especially young women, that hit close to home. Jennifer Keaton is the one many viewers forget, and that's exactly why she matters. As the youngest Keaton, Jennifer started out as the classic sitcom little sister, wide-eyed, sweet, mostly observing from the sidelines. But as the show went on, something unusual happened. She didn't stay cute. She got sharper, more sarcastic, more self-aware, and often more emotionally grounded than her older siblings. A rumor was that Jennifer was written out because the character wasn't popular, but the fact was the show simply ran out of room as Alex and Mallory's stories expanded. Tina Yothers played Jennifer with subtlety, never competing for laughs, never forcing attention. She was the kid in the family who noticed everything. In many ways, Jennifer became the audience, watching the chaos, learning quietly, adapting. And that realism is why her absence in later seasons felt noticeable, even if people couldn't quite explain why. What truly set Family Ties apart wasn't politics or punchlines. It was respect. Parents listened to their kids. Kids challenged their parents. Disagreements didn't end with winners, just understanding. No one was humiliated for being wrong. That's why people from all backgrounds still feel comfortable watching it. By the late 80s, the cast was growing up and fast. Alex was becoming an adult. Mallory had evolved. The kids weren't kids anymore. The writers faced a choice: stretch the show until it broke, or let it end with dignity. They chose dignity. A Fable was that Family Ties was canceled, but the fact is the creators chose to end the series while it was still beloved. That decision preserved its warmth and its legacy. At its core, Family Ties taught something rare. You can disagree and still love each other. You can change without betraying who you were. You can grow up without losing your family. That message aged better than any joke. Where are they now? Michael J. Fox left Family Ties as one of the most beloved actors of his generation. He was funny, relentless, and then quietly, something changed. In 1991, at just 29 years old, Fox was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. For years, he kept it private, not out of shame, but out of fear that the work he loved would be taken away. People think Parkinson's ended Michael J. Fox's career, but the fact is, it transformed his purpose. When Fox finally went public in 1998, the response was overwhelming. Instead of fading away, he stepped forward. He founded the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which has since raised over $1 billion for Parkinson's research. He reframed the conversation not around loss, but around resilience. Fox once said, "Acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It means understanding something is what it is and finding meaning beyond it." That philosophy turned a former sitcom star into a global advocate, and it may be the most powerful chapter of his story. Meredith Baxter, who played Elise Keaton, spent decades being seen one way: America's TV mom? Warm, grounded, dependable. But later in life, Baxter came to a personal realization, one that reshaped her identity. In 2009, she publicly came out as a lesbian, not as a headline grab, not as controversy, but as honesty. She described it as a later life realization, not a reinvention. She spoke openly about living much of her life according to expectations, and finally choosing authenticity. Her story resonated deeply with people who felt they were too old or too late to live truthfully. Baxter didn't rewrite her past. She simply understood herself more clearly, and that quiet courage mirrors the very values Family Ties stood for. Michael Gross, who played Stephen Keaton. After Family Ties, Gross continued working steadily on stage, television, and film. He later reflected that Stephen Keaton was one of the few TV dads who was allowed to learn on screen. Justin Bateman, who played Mallory Keaton. Bateman transitioned away from acting and became a writer, director, and advocate for natural aging, pushing back against Hollywood's obsession with youth. Tina Yothers, who played Jennifer Keaton. After Family Ties ended, Tina Yothers stepped away from the spotlight, and unlike many child actors, she didn't chase fame. But that transition wasn't easy. In her early adult years, Yothers struggled with the sudden loss of structure that came after growing up on television. She later spoke openly about dealing with personal challenges, including substance issues, before choosing a quieter, more private life. She intentionally chose privacy and stability over Hollywood. In later years, she returned briefly to music and occasional TV appearances, but on her own terms, no pressure, no spotlight chasing. Her story mirrors something Family Ties itself understood well. Not everyone needs to be the star to live a full life. Sometimes, stepping away is the success. That alone feels very Family Ties in conclusion. Some shows age poorly. Jokes land wrong. Values feel dated. Comfort turns into discomfort. Family Ties avoided that trap because it wasn't built on cruelty, sarcasm, or embarrassment. It was built on listening, forgiveness, conversation, growth. No one was reduced to a punchline. Even Alex, confident, smug, stubborn Alex, was allowed to learn. That's why revisiting the show doesn't feel embarrassing. It didn't change television with shock or spectacle. It changed it with respect. It showed that families could argue without breaking, that parents could be imperfect but present, that children could challenge ideas without losing love. And perhaps most importantly, it proved that growth doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. In the end, Family Ties wasn't about politics. It wasn't about generations. It was about what happens when people who love each other learn how to live with their differences. And maybe that's why it still feels like home.